start off by asking you, Stephanie, did you happen to see Biden's speech that he gave at a campaign fundraiser last Friday, where he basically said that like he's the reason that Hamas attacked Israel?
No, I did not see that.
Yeah, specifically what he said was, quote, one of the reasons why Hamas moved on Israel is because they knew I was about to sit down with the Saudis, end quote. So I was reading an article in the Epic Times, and the way they put it, they said, quote, the US president indicated that he thinks Hamas terrorists launched a deadly assault on September 7th because guess what? The Saudis want to recognize Israel, and we're near being able to do so. And so basically, it's all because of our amazing president working to bring Saudi Arabia and Israel together. Like, isn't that great? And then on top of that, Biden also claimed that the United States holds the world together. So I want to know what you think. Like, is it Biden's great work that prompted Hamas to attack Israel? And is Biden holding the world together, Stephanie?
Only a narcissist like Biden would think that. And I mean, the Saudis, like, they clearly do not like him. Remember the whole like fist bump thing where with Trump, they like held an entire parade. And I think they even said on video, like they made a statement that they're not friends with him. So he's clearly living in a alternate reality. But I'm sure the real reason they attacked was the same reason that Russia invaded Ukraine and that China is eyeing Taiwan. Like we have a weak leader who showed his hand with the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal and being the only president in US history to take action to unsecure our border. So I'm sure Hamas knew that they could take this action while we have a weak leader. I mean, they're going to take full advantage of that. They sure as fuck didn't do it while President Trump was in office. But like with all of this that's happening, I think it's important to educate ourselves on the history of the conflict between Israel and Palestine so that you can form your own opinion based on the facts, because there's so much going around right now and everyone has their own opinion on the history of it. So I just wanted to lay out all of the facts of like what happened, and you can go look all of these up. But prior to World War I, the area that we now know as Israel, Gaza, and then like all of those surrounding areas were part of the Ottoman Empire. And that was made up of various groups of people. So neither the Jews nor the Arabs had a state, but the Jews had a nationalist movement that was calling for one. And the Ottomans fought with the losing team in World War I. And so as a result, much of that land became controlled by the British and the French. But at the time, instead of keeping this land for themselves, the British and French agreed to allow the land to become independent nation states. So this ended up becoming Iraq, Iran, Jordan, and Syria. And Palestine was the name that the Romans gave the Jewish kingdom of Judea. But that was like all it was. It wasn't an actual nation state. It was more just a geographic name. So it was determined that this area known as Palestine would become a national home for the Jewish people. And the reason being that the League of Nations, which was basically like the precursor to the United Nations, they believed that the Jews were the indigenous people to the area. So that was why they wanted that to be the home for the Jewish people. And in 1936, the Arabs revolted against the British over that land. And the Peel Commission determined that the reason for this conflict was that there were two peoples, the Arabs and the Jews, that wanted to govern the same land. So what happened was the British offered the Arabs 80% of the disputed territory and the Jews the remaining 20%. And so the Jews voted to accept the offer, but the Arabs said no, and they continued their violent rebellion. Then in 1947, the United Nations voted on a two-state solution, which you would think would solve everything. Again, the Jews accepted the offer and the Arabs rejected it, and an all-out war ensued that involved Jordan, Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, and Syria. Now, Israel won the war, and so they began like building the nation of Israel. And then in 1947, Jordan came in and occupied the territory of East Palestine and the West Bank and expelled the Jews from those areas, known as like ethnic cleansing. And so they took over that area. And then in 1967, the Arabs, along with Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, took part in what was known as the Six-Day War with Israel. And again, Israel won and was willing to negotiate this like East Jerusalem territory, which we now know is the Gaza Strip, in exchange for peace. And so the Arab nations met and announced the three no's: no peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, and no negotiation with Israel. Then in 2000, the Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and the Palestine Liberation Chairman Yasser Arafat met at Camp David to create a new two-state solution to end this conflict and like finally create peace in that area. So Barak from Israel offered Arafat a Palestinian state, and that would include all of Gaza, 94% of the West Bank, and East Jerusalem as its capital. And Arafat rejected the offer. And this was when Bill Clinton had made the statement that Arafat was there for 14 days and said no to everything. So the Arabs ended up conducting like a whole slew of suicide bombings that ended up killing over 1,000 Israelis. Then in 2005, Israel left Gaza, leaving the land to the Palestinians to develop. And instead of developing the land, they used all the funds to turn Gaza into a terrorist base. And in 2008, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert tried again with the same deal as before, but also offering additional land. And the new Palestinian leader, Mahmoud Abbas, of course, said no. And so this is just in this last century, but this conflict has been going on for thousands of years. The Jewish Bible like has verified information in it regarding this conflict, and Jerusalem is mentioned 669 times. So they say that like that is proving that this is central to Jewish heritage, this land. And while the political landscape of Israel has swapped hands many times between the Arabs and the Jews, the only time in history that the land was known as a sovereign state was with the Jewish people. They formed 3 nation states in Israel throughout history, throughout documented history that we have. So based on all of that, like it's clear that a two-state solution is going to continue to be rejected by the Palestinians. So what do they want? Well, in 2008, when they took the Gaza Strip, they voted in Hamas, and that was it. They had that one election, and then Hamas remained in since then. And I think that that really stated a clear message as to what they want. And to understand like what I'm talking about, I looked up the Hamas charter, and I think everyone should go and read this, the full thing. So the original 1988 version of the charter emphasized 4 main themes. Number 1 was destroying Israel and establishing an Islamic theocracy in Palestine as essential. Number 2, unrestrained jihad is necessary to achieve this. Number 3, negotiated resolutions of Jewish and Palestinian claims to the land are unacceptable. So they do not want to negotiate whatsoever. Number 4, historical anti-Semitic tropes that reinforce the goals. So the covenant proclaims that Israel will exist until Islam obliterates it, and jihad against Jews is required until Judgment Day. This is in their charter. Compromise over the land is forbidden. The documents promote holy war is divinely ordained, reject political solutions, and call for instilling these views in children. So they don't want to negotiate. They don't want to share the land. They want to completely take it over. And when they say, like, what is it that they chant, like from the river to the sea? That's what they mean. They mean they want to take over all of Israel. They want all the Jewish people wiped out. And so you can go through and read the whole thing, but the one article that I wanted to point out was Article 20, which calls for action by the people as a single body against a vicious enemy which acts in a way similar to Nazism, making no differentiation between man and woman, between children and old people. So you might see like a lot of interviews where people that grew up in these areas talk about this and how Hamas, they don't value human life the same way that Israel does or that we do. And they don't value like women and children in the same way that the rest of the world does. Um, and so when they are attacking Israel, like they don't see that. They look at babies, at women, at everyone the same. They're all the enemy and they all need to be obliterated. Um, so the 1988 charter contained references to anti-Semitic canards, such as the assertion that through shrewd manipulation of imperial countries and secret societies, Jews were behind a wide range of events and disasters going as far back in history as the French Revolution. With their money, they took control of world media, news agencies, the press, publishing houses, broadcasting stations, and others. With their money, they stirred revolutions in various parts of the world with the purpose of achieving their interests and reaping the fruit therein. They were behind the French Revolution, the Communist Revolution, and most of the revolutions we heard and hear about here and there. With their money, they formed secret societies such as Freemason, Rotary clubs, the Lions, and others in different parts of the world for the purpose of sabotaging societies and achieving Zionist interests. With their money, they were able to control imperialistic countries and instigate them to colonize many countries in order to enable them to exploit their resources and spread corruption there. Well, damn, Tara, it sounds just like an Illuminati conspiracy theory that Hamas, like, they basically are looking at the Jewish people as like the Illuminati, the people running the world, or at least that's what it sounds like from this charter.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt anything you were saying. Like I had comments coming up in my head, but I felt like the way you told that was so powerful because when you really look at that history, like why the fuck are we trying to negotiate peace deals? Like,
Right.
I mean, we've been trying for how many years and what Biden thinks he's going to come in there and save the world, as he so says. And it's just like, how much clearer do you need it than looking at their charter to see that they don't give a fuck about negotiating peace deals and they want to eradicate the Jewish people? And as you were talking, I was thinking like, and I wish I'd done research on this, but I haven't. So I want to know if Hitler did any of his research like on the history of the
Hmm. Yeah.
Palestinian conflict with Israel, because everything that you read about in that charter is so eerily similar to exactly the propaganda that Hitler was doing, you know.
It's exactly. They took a page out of the Nazi propaganda. So Hitler thought the same thing. He thought that these Jews were like basically running the world and keeping all the money to themselves, and that, they had to be eradicated in order for society to like continue or whatever. And I didn't put this in my notes for today, but there was a letter from whoever the Palestinian leader was, because there was no like Palestinian prime minister or anything, because it's never been established as a state that's been
Yeah.
recognized legally. But whoever was like the person in charge at the time wrote a letter to Hitler saying that what Hitler was doing with the Jews in Germany and Poland and that area, he wanted to replicate in Palestine the same measures. So he was basically asking for Hitler's help to implement the same policy, um, in that area. So, I mean, they were partnering with the Germans, and when the Germans lost, again, like you were on the wrong side. You were on the wrong team. And so, like, obviously that didn't help them, but they were very much on the same page. And that's why in a lot of these episodes I keep saying like the anti-Semitism, because there's a lot of people that are posting on social media about free Palestine, free Palestine. And they're doing it, you know, like we said, virtue signaling. They think it's cool, whatever. What they don't realize is when you look at this charter, what that means is obliterating Jews, wiping
Yeah.
them off the face of the earth and wiping Israel off the map. That is what they mean. And so
And
I
it
think
also,
that
I
mhm,
want to point out too that you made it very clear in doing your research. Hamas was voted in. They didn't
yeah,
take over Palestine and turn it into, this terrorist organization. They were fucking voted in.
right. So again, it's like Israel gave them that area and then set up like a democracy. Like you vote in who you want elected. They voted for Hamas. And that was in 2008. So from 2008 to 2023, instead of building hospitals and schools and infrastructure, they have been building tunnels under civilians
Yeah.
to make bombs. Like that's what they're focused on. And I'm not saying that every Palestinian is okay with it. There's no way of knowing because even when they poll people, no Palestinian is going to say anything against Hamas, right? Because you'd probably be killed. So we don't really know what they think. But yeah, they did vote them in, and they have no intention of obviously leaving. They haven't stepped down since 2008, and they haven't held another election since 2008. And it's clear that they don't want peace. And the other thing is, this obviously is not just about land. Like, this is much deeper. It's a deep hatred of Jews. And I think it's really important that people understand that, and that people understand that in these protests, when the things that they're chanting, like river to the sea, or whatever that phrase is, I'm sorry if I'm getting it wrong, it means eradicating Jews. Like, everyone needs to really understand that's what it means when they're saying this, because I think there's people in these protests that understand what it means. And then I think that there's people that are ignorant and have not done their research, that are just saying something and not realizing that it's deeply anti-Semitic. Um, and then another point that I want to make is that the Palestinians are not welcomed into their neighboring Arab states. No,
Yeah.
why isn't anyone talking about that? Why isn't Egypt welcoming them? Why aren't Jordan, welcoming them? So I want to play, it's just a super short clip, but it's from a former Muslim Brotherhood member. And she's going to explain exactly why.
The Arab governments are terrified of taking in people from Gaza because they know Hamas militia members are hiding amongst them, and they know that they are going to regroup on their own soil. Hamas has been threatening the government of Egypt for some time now, and Egypt has been having skirmishes with them over Sinai.
So they don't want them either, because they know that, yeah, like, we can help the innocent Palestinians, but Hamas is going to come in with them.
Yeah.
They're going to pose as civilians, and they don't want Hamas in their countries because they've seen what they've done and they know what they stand for, and they don't value human life. Like, that is the other thing. They don't want peace, and they don't value human life. So a big part of their belief is that Palestinians should die for this cause, which is why they're telling the people of Gaza, don't flee. You need to stay put as we're being bombed and everything by Israel, because they don't care if they die. They think it's like a noble cause to die.
Yeah, but if you do flee, make your way into the United States,
Right.
because you're going to get through the border there, and then we can unleash our terrorist war on residents and citizens of the United States directly.
Well, and here's something else that I heard the other day that scared the shit out of me. And again, like, I'm just trying to educate people, just so you know what I mean? So you don't fall for a lot of the propaganda going around. But this is something that's been chanted at the protests now in current day, but this is something they've been saying back, decades ago, which is that America is big Satan and Israel is little Satan. So that's how they view basically, like, white people, Jewish people, and Americans, that we're Satan, that we're the devil, that we're bad, that whatever. And so,
Funny that our own government is promoting that same ideology.
and people in our Congress are like flying the flag outside of their office
Yeah.
of a United States building, government building. They're flying the Palestinian flag. Um, And so what that tells me is exactly what you said, Tara. Like, before this current conflict broke out, you better believe that they saw this open border and they made their way to America already. And they're already here as sleeper cells all over the United States and have no regard for human life. And they're just waiting. And what scares the shit out of me is, like, we think about terrorists as being like one guy here, another guy there. When I saw all those Palestinians gather and protest in New York, Vegas, Miami, Chicago, and the streets were filled with like thousands of people, that made me think, like, what if it's not just a few, suicide bombers? Like, they've got a whole fucking army here that
Yep.
are like, they're coming out. I mean, they're not trying to hide the fact that they're anti-Semitic or anything else. So it's very concerning. And this is
And those,
why we want a closed border.
yeah, and those are the ones that are actually coming out on the streets. I guarantee you there are hundreds, thousands, whatever more that are just laying in wait and keeping quiet right now.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and even the ones that aren't keeping quiet, they're tamed for what they're
Yeah.
really, brought up to do. And I actually watched Palestinian cartoons as part of this research, because from a very young age, like, all of their children's programs and their cartoons, um, they're horrific. I mean, they show brutal murders and then they say this is what Jewish people do. This is what Israel does. Like, it's really bad. I mean, they're programming these kids from a very young age to be filled of like hatred towards Israel. And so it's very concerning. And this is exactly why we want a closed border, to keep everyone safe from groups like this that don't value, human life. And then I did want to just touch on the fact that Biden wants to send $100 million in humanitarian aid to Gaza while Hamas is in control. I mean, think about that. He wants to send $100 million, obviously to help the civilians. I get that. But do you really think Hamas is going to be like, oh, here you go? No, they're going to take that money and use it for their military, like their terrorist efforts, just like they've taken all the money for the Gaza Strip since 2008 and used it for the military. And again, why do you think that the neighboring Arab countries aren't helping with humanitarian efforts? Because they know Hamas is going to take anything they send and it's not going to go to the people. So again, it's like, if Egypt isn't opening their border, if Jordan isn't, if they're not sending humanitarian aid, this is why. Like, they know, and they're just as afraid and worried about Hamas as the rest of us. So that should tell us something, and that hopefully, like, some of these people that are just blindly supporting this will get these facts and realize you are supporting a terrorist organization that hates Jews and hates Americans and does not care how many innocent people, doesn't care if their own people die in pursuit of eradicating them from the face of the earth, basically.
Yeah. And as you said, we continue to send money to terrorists, and they continue to attack US-based forces in the Middle East. Al Jazeera reported that drones and missiles were launched at bases hosting US troops in Iraq last Thursday. There was another incident, 2 incidents in Iraq and Syria on Wednesday. You had rockets hitting a military base hosting US forces in Baghdad. And so, Biden announces over the weekend that we're going to be sending like additional air defense missile systems to the Middle East. We've already deployed aircraft carrier support ships. We've deployed 2,000 Marines in the last 2 weeks. And now we're preparing to send more troops. Meanwhile, Washington is issuing these heightened alerts for terrorist activity. But don't worry about it, because according to Pentagon spokesperson Brigadier General Patrick Ryder, he told reporters that he doesn't see any kind of link or direct connection between the rise in terrorist attacks and the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Are you fucking kidding me? You even had 2 officials with Iranian-backed arms groups in Iraq confirm to AP News that the attacks last week were directed at the 2 US bases. So again, we're continuing to send money, like you said, humanitarian aid. None of that money is going to fucking go to humanitarian aid. It's going to go to fuel continued attacks, not only against the people of Israel, but against Americans.
Right. Well, I want to bring up a point too. A lot of what you're hearing in the news, well, I shouldn't say a lot of, like Newsmax and like maybe Fox News, um, they're making the point that $100 million in humanitarian aid, like, first of all, that would be $100 per person in Gaza. So like, it's really, they think it's not really for that. It's more to appease Iran. And so again, it's like Jamie Comer's opening up an investigation, another investigation into the Iran deal, because Tara, I don't know about you, but like, I have always looked at the Iran deal that they put in place when Obama was in office, when Joe Biden was VP, and then Trump got rid of it. And then like, he couldn't wait. Biden couldn't wait to put that deal in place again. And apparently all of the documentation they've kept secret. They won't let anyone see it. And just knowing that Biden has taken money from all these other countries, you just know, like, likely there has been money exchanged from the Iranians to Biden. And so it's really concerning because it's like all of that money went to these terrorist groups, and Iran is funding Hamas. And plus, didn't they say that a bunch of US embassies were attacked over the past couple days? I think in all of those areas, every embassy was attacked.
Yeah, and that's why they were sending out these heightened terrorist alerts, like don't go to places of large gatherings, don't go to US embassies in other countries.
Yeah. So
I would bet he's getting money from Iran. I mean, he has to be.
Well, yeah, why else would you want that deal? The Iran deal.
Especially,
Like,
yeah, why would you want the Iran deal? Why would you get rid of all our own natural resources and make us dependent on the Middle East for oil and gas? Like, come on, this
he's
is
compromised.
Yeah, beyond.
And it's like, look at how much damage has been done in 3 years. And everything he said he wanted to do was literally what we already had under Trump. And he could have come into office and just let it be. And instead, like, it's bad. It's really bad. I'll end this like on a funny note. I saw a TikTok like meme, and it was like this couple like just dying laughing. And the caption was like, this is liberals, or like liberals when they vote for Biden thinking that their student loans are going to be forgiven, but instead they get drafted to fight. I was like, oh my God, that is so like spot on. But I mean, it's kind of sad because it's the reality.
But seriously, that's where it's headed.
Yeah.
That's where it's headed. So
it is. So, but yeah, I hope that I know it's kind of like boring going through a history lesson, but I just think everyone should be like prepared and like have these conversations too. It's like, ask one of your friends that's pro-Palestine, like some of these questions, like who was in charge prior to 1947 in Palestine? Like, when was Palestine considered a nation state? When did they have sovereignty over that land? Because the history shows.
Why have they rejected every single possible deal that was placed on the table that would have given them like total domination of their own area?
Yeah. And why aren't their neighboring Arab countries helping or taking them in? Why are they closing their borders to them? Like, basic questions, because I guarantee they can't answer any of them because they don't know. So maybe like everyone can take this knowledge and educate people that are just going along with this, thinking they're virtue signaling or whatever.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, thanks for tuning in. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.